Hello, so I'm going to be addressing good cause eviction in New York State, which is currently being addressed in Albany as we speak. There are some things we're going to go over, including the background to the housing crisis in New York, as well as what good cause eviction is and what evictions impacts are on people, as well as what's going on in New York State. So first, just taking a look at some figures and understanding what the picture of housing and tenancy and evictions are in New York State. So the top bar is from data pulled from Housing Justice for All, which is an organization that we'll hear a little bit more about later, and they are mostly focused on New York City in terms of these numbers. But the you can see from the bar graph that when there was a moratorium on evictions, there were obviously zero during the pandemic, and it's grown and grown and grown throughout the state, and this is by the thousands, so 662,000 evictions, um, growing from 26,000 in early 22 when the moratorium was just lifted. So, of course, homelessness is a direct consequence of eviction, and what is part of the system of homelessness is the amount of apartments that are vacant that people can live in. So, what happens is when there's low vacancy rates in a city or a town, landlords are able to take advantage of the vacancy rates being so low and charge more. And so, oftentimes, what you get is at the end of someone's lease, the rent being raised by any number percentage point at all. All a landlord has to do in New York State is give 30 to 60 days, depending on the length of tenancy, and say, this is how much your rent is going to be, effectively creating an eviction. So, also, I just want to say this is in New York City, less than 1% of the units are below 1650. Less than 1% of units are below 1650 a month. So, here I'm just going to mention some of the consequences of eviction. Of course, we can imagine down below where it says the individual health impacts. This is from a study that looked at evictions across the country. But we're seeing, of course, depression, anxiety, physiological distress, and suicide. Those things are increased likelihoods because of eviction. And then high blood pressure and substance use, more physiological issues, and there's also evidence of child maltreatment increasing with evictions. What's interesting, I think, to see is the community impacts. I was particularly interested to see that where there's higher eviction filings in a community, there's lower voter turnout, and I think it makes a lot of sense that there's weaker social cohesion, social ties, and economic connectedness as well. So eviction is devastating, and New York State is one state that has not implemented some protections around evictions that other places in the country have, for example, New Jersey. So we have basically a no fault eviction in New York. A landlord can evict a tenant without specifying a reason and when the lease expires. So basically, good cause eviction, they outline specific things that would qualify as good cause, like non payment of rent or violation of lease terms, behavior of the tenants, for example, like if a tenant breaks a law. Of course, these things can be part of the lease, but at this point, these are not the only reasons that somebody could be evicted in New York State. So, good cause eviction is aimed at protecting tenants from what we discussed earlier, which is especially rent hikes. So New Jersey, California, Oregon. New Jersey has had good cause eviction since for at least 30 years. So following on the heels of our neighbors in New Jersey, several cities, mostly in the mid Hudson Valley. One is missing here, I think. Beacon is another one. Kingston, Albany, Poughkeepsie, Newburgh, and Beacon, I believe, passed good cause eviction from the years 2020 and 2022. However, none of those cities can uphold good cause eviction in court because there are state property laws that prevent. And so there were just lawsuit after lawsuit. And as those lawsuits were ruling in favor of the landlords, basically all the towns just sort of decided, well, we can't keep up with these lawsuits. This isn't going to work. So good cause eviction was brought first by State Senator Julia Salazar in Senate Bill 305 in 2019. It has been struck down and reintroduced twice before. There is not enough state assembly support for good cause eviction, which has a lot to do with the landlord power in the state. So, what is good cause eviction Senate Bill 305 going to do or propose to do? So, some of the key provisions is that landlords would be required to justify rent hikes greater than 3% or 150% of the consumer price index before a judge. So, tenants falling behind on rent due to such increases could use good cause of eviction as a defense in eviction cases. So, basically, it creates a burden on the landlord to raise rent higher than 3%. Also, with evictions, tenants would have the power to challenge evictions that are arbitrary, retaliatory, or discriminatory, which they currently cannot. They could ask a judge to determine if there is just cause for a termination, and landlords would be required to justify their action. I just wanted to show you that this is true for any bill in the state Senate or in the Assembly. You can see a graphic of where the bill is located, which I just thought was so cool. So the fight for good cause eviction includes activists throughout the state. There's a coalition of 80 organizations called Housing Justice for All who fight for all kinds of policies in the state and also in New York City, especially around tenants' rights and homelessness. So after 2019 to 2024, we were not able to get the fight for good cause eviction passed. These organizations pivoted to trying to get some sort of policy into the state budget. So the state budget has a big, huge provision around creating more housing stock, really addressing the housing crisis in New York State. And so it was believed by these activists and policymakers who were fighting for a good cause that it may be able to get passed through the budget, where the landlords would have less lobbying power than in the state assembly. So that is not what happened. So what is happening now is, as we speak, negotiations are at play, and it appears that the good cause eviction is going to be nowhere near the proposal. It's going to be what is being deemed a Swiss cheese good cause budget. So Governor Hochul has a huge housing plan which has been in the works for years. And its main focus is on building the housing stock up in key parts of the state. So, when activists were hoping to get the good cause into the budget, they were not accounting for what kind of sway landlord power would have over the budget. But it was sort of like a hope to be able to see some real protections for tenants. So, as you can see, these are the sort of side by side what's going on with the proposal of good cause and what sounds like it's actually happening. By the time that this comes out, we will probably have at least a better idea of whether or not the Swiss cheese good cause is what is in the budget. But as of now, it's sort of like word on the street. This is what's going on from people who are part of the negotiations. So instead of the rent hike capped at 3% or 1.5% of inflation, it's rent being capped at 10% or 5 points on the consumer index. Good Cause has landlords with 4 units and under excluded from this policy, whereas what's in the budget now looks like it's landlords with 10 units excluded from the policy. Good Cause includes higher price units. Swiss Cheese excludes higher price units. And Swiss Cheese looks like it's going to be excluding at least 2.8 million tenants that would have otherwise been protected. Swiss Cheese has cities opting in as opposed to Good Cause having universal. This is just like the law of the land. And advocates for Good Cause say that the Swiss cheese budget is unenforceable. So we will see what will happen, but it's not looking good. Also, what wasn't looking good was the experience I had a few years ago, which catapulted me into interest in housing rights. And there's a picture of me and my friend cleaning up the sewage spill that had been taking place over and over in my apartment, which effectively led to my leaving, which is because my landlord was increasing rent over and over and not cleaning up sewage spills. Despite the health department having telling him what to do, and then me having absolutely no way to enforce what the health department was saying that he needed to do. So here are my questions. How can social workers help clients navigate insecure housing like rental increases and threats of eviction from landlords? What are the mental health considerations of insecure housing? And as a future social worker, do you feel prepared to help clients with housing issues? What information do you need to be more prepared to address tenant rights with clients? And here are my sources. I'm looking forward to reading all of your responses.